The most profitable thing America ever bought was not a weapon, a factory, or a road. It was tuition, somebody else's tuition. In 1944, with the war still being fought, Congress passed a law about school. Guess how many people ended up using it? Around 8 million out of 16 million who came home. And decades later, somebody sat down and worked out what it earned back. The number was so large that most people assume it is a misprint. To understand why they did it, you have to understand what they were terrified of. Nobody in 1944 was thinking about education. They were thinking about a crowd. 16 million people were going to arrive home in the space of about 2 years. Almost none of them had a job waiting, and the economy had only just stopped being a depression. Guess what had happened the last time America sent an army home and offered it nothing? 12 years earlier, thousands of veterans camped in Washington demanding money they were owed. They were cleared out by soldiers in front of cameras, and the country never quite forgot it. So this was not generosity. This was a government that had seen the bill for doing nothing. The whole law exists because somebody asked the unglamorous question first. Not what do they deserve, but what happens to us if we get this wrong? The bill itself nearly did not happen, and the reason is almost comic. It was drafted in a hotel room, in pencil, by a lawyer working for a veterans organization. In committee, it came down to a tie, and one member was at home in Georgia. Guess what they did about it? They found him, drove him through the night, and put him on an aeroplane to Washington. He arrived, the tie broke, and the law passed. The single most valuable investment in American history was one missing man away from dying quietly. Nobody in that room believed they were doing anything historic. They thought they were preventing a riot. Something gets left out of every retelling of this, and it is the best part of it. The universities fought it, openly and in public. The president of Harvard warned that standards would collapse. The head of Chicago said the campuses would fill with people who did not belong there. Their argument was simple, and it is the argument you still hear today. If you let anyone in, the thing they are getting into stops being worth anything. Guess what happened when the veterans actually showed up? They outperformed the students who had come straight from school, consistently. Older, poorer, and with worse preparation, and their marks were still better. Nobody had predicted it because everybody had been measuring the wrong thing. The schools had been selecting for preparation. The war had selected for something else entirely. The physical problem was immediate and completely ridiculous. Campuses built for a few thousand people were suddenly holding twice that. Guess where the universities put them? Army surplus. Corrugated metal huts on the lawns. Trailers parked where the gardens had been. Lectures ran in shifts because there were not enough rooms in the day. Married students with children lived in what were effectively temporary villages. It looked like a failure. Photographs from those years looked like a refugee camp with a library. And it was the single most productive decade any of those institutions ever had. Which is worth remembering the next time somebody says the facilities are not ready yet. One fact about all this surprises people more than any other, and it is the important one. The majority of the people who use that law never set foot in a university. Far more of them went into trade training than into degrees. Welding, machining, electrical work, refrigeration, building. Guess which group the economy needed more of in 1948? It needed both, and the law did not force anyone to pretend otherwise. That is the design decision almost nobody copies. It did not decide what people should become. It paid for whatever they had chosen. And there is a part that did not work, which is worth saying plainly. The money was handed out locally, and locally meant segregated. Black veterans were turned away from colleges and refused loans in enormous numbers. The law was national, the gate was not. And that gap is a large part of what came next.
What did all of it actually come to then?
The education part cost something like $14 billion of 1950s money. Guess what a congressional study decided it had returned when they looked back decades later? Close to $7 for every single dollar spent. Not in goodwill, in tax revenue from people who now earned more. The government did not donate that money. It bought a share in 8 million people and collected. And the second effect was larger than the first and completely unplanned. A generation whose parents had never studied past school suddenly expected their children to. That expectation is the actual product. It outlived everyone who voted for it. The thing worth taking out of all this is not really about America at all. The best return anybody has ever measured came from paying for capability in people who already wanted it, not persuading them, not selecting them, removing the one obstacle that was in the way. Guess how most organizations spend their training money instead? On the people they have already decided are worth it, which is the safest and smallest possible bet. The lesson from 1944 is that the returns were hiding in the people nobody had picked. America did not get rich by being clever about who deserved it. It got rich by not bothering to ask.